brought over into slavery, which wasn't right, but they got the gospel when they got here.
Patronizing God complex does he have? And we got a gospel, all right. We got a gospel, but not the gospel.
And you know what? I bet you there's a lot of Africans that if they hadn't have been brought over, not saying it was right, don't misunderstand, not justifying the slavery in the situation, but God, I still believe, used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel, and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better? For them to have lived their entire life in Africa free, doing their voodoo or whatever.
Him to try to justify us being snatched away from our home and everything that we know to come to America just to get a watered down, tampered, adulterated gospel is so demeaning. This just goes to show some of the privilege some people seem to think that they have, to have the gall to say that them giving us their version of the gospel and religion trumps us being where we were born on a homeland, living a free life. This is exactly the point I was making in my other video about people that are not Black or African descent always assuming that our religious practices were voodoo, hoodoo, evil, or anything that was not spiritual just because it didn't come from them. And it also just shows you how ignorant some people are not to even know that a lot of the Bible actually happened on the continent of Africa. So it would be very hard to avoid Black people if most of the Bible occurred, or some of the Bible, or a lot of the Bible occurred on the African continent. They don't even want to recognize and admit the fact that Egypt is in Africa. Furthermore, the oldest Bible was actually found and still is in Ethiopia, sir. Also, it's interesting that they always have something to say about our religions and hoodoo and whatever else we may have been doing over in Africa before they found the reason to come over there and snatch us up. But they have absolutely no problem with this false idol.
And then dying and going to hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven. They get the opportunity. Now again, it doesn't justify it. The ends do not justify the means, but this is how God works. This is what God does in the Bible. And we have Black people in here. I don't think any of you guys were ever slaves. I was never a slave. It's like, white privilege. You were never a slave. You were never living during the time, unless you're very old, like 60 or 70 maybe, or 80 years old. You're never even living during a time where segregation was a thing in this country. I mean, what are you crying about? Nothing even happened to you. You're just making up stuff. You can't look at the facts that I was reading and just attribute that to some kind of white privilege. It's not real. Get over it. Quit having all the excuses. Why don't you take some responsibility for your choices, be content with whatever situation you were born into, and make the most of it. God's not limited to your situation. He can do above, what we ask or think.
It's very easy for him to say to us, oh, just get over it. He'd never say this to any other group of people that have been through an atrocity. And I'm not even going to go through those groups of people because, you can look that up and we all know who they are. But for him to discount the fact that, no, we're not physically in chains, but all it did was shift. If you want to look at the 13th Amendment, you want to look at the actual, fact that slavery still exists. It still exists. Our brothers and sisters on the African continent are still dealing with slavery. Slavery is still actually and technically legal in the United States. If you just look at the laws that are on the books, if you look at the populations that are actually imprisoned. And he wants to talk about, oh, we don't have to deal with this and we don't have to deal with that. I don't think he looks at the populations actually still in these churches. Church is still one of the most segregated places in the United States. Communities are still the most segregated places in the United States. So segregation still exists. Schools, the school system, the public school system is some of the most segregated places in the United States. So his ignorance is just appalling. And the fact that he has the guts and the you know, the gall to say what he's saying shows just how much privilege he actually has. But I want to thank you all for watching, and it's just a reminder. It's just a reminder for all the people that have something to say about what I say, the fact that anything and everything that we do when it comes to religion and spirituality is deemed incorrect, not right, insufficient, evil, hoodoo, voodoo, whatever label they want to put on it, just because they want to label it something because it's not what they're doing. And I think, and I am so grateful that a lot of us are waking up to this foolishness and coming out of these churches, because this is the dogma and the propaganda that we've been horse fed for centuries. And we're still being fed this crap, not only by them, but even by our own people. And we just have to wake up and just, listen, everything started with us. It's going to end with us. Thank you all for watching and listening. Please leave your questions, comments, and concerns.